you, Elizabeth.
There you go. And I am going to stick around if anybody has any problems. I'm going to throw my cell phone in the chat. You can give me a call if you're having tech problems or something. I am going to go do my own thing, including I'm going to leave and make a cup of tea. But if you need anything, I should be very close by.
So Elizabeth, do you have me as like a co-host?
No.
Screens and
All right.
And actually that spotlight thing might be handy too, because I'm going to use my rear camera too.
Okay. So you want me to spotlight you?
I
have you as a co-host.
Okay. So if I'm a co-host, then do I have access to the spotlight thing?
I have no idea. So if you would, if you mouse over your image, there's a little blue thing should come up with mute and then 3 little dots.
Yep.
Click on the 3 dots and then you should have, okay.
So spotlight for everyone. So basically that highlights the whatever the screen is that I want to show.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
okay.
I've been using Zoom forever too, and I keep learning new stuff all the time.
I know, every day. Yep.
Okay, so Catherine, it's nice to meet you after all of our emails back and forth.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to this. And Jerry, it's fun to see you. I think we cut hair at the same time. Jerry and I had long hair on the board for you.
Yeah.
So I'm envisioning this class as being sort of probably more of a conversation than it is actually going to be a formal whatever. So
sure.
As we go through all the various things, you guys can raise whatever questions you have as we go. Catherine, I saw your question about really wanting to dive into color and thinking more about what colors go with each other and which, what to use as background versus other things. I have oodles and caboodles of swatches that I'm going to show you guys for different purposes. I sent you that handout that has sort of that sample beginning pattern that we're going to play with a little bit. I will tell you, I made a mistake when I sent it out. It's actually 9 rows by 18 stitches. So there's 18 stitches in the repeat, not 13. So my apologies for that. I didn't realize it until this morning when I was trying to figure out how can I get from 13 to it wasn't making any sense when I was making some adjustments to the thing. So yeah, if you can just
Not a biggie.
the 18 stitches, that would be awesome. Okay, so I don't know whether I will actually, so I also sent you an outline of sort of the topics that I plan to talk about. I don't know that they will necessarily go in the order that they are on the piece of paper. But they will probably eventually get to all of them. So I guess one of the things when you're designing a project, probably the first thing thinking about what type of project is it? Obviously, if you're making a hat, you're not going to want to use a giant star pattern because it's not going to fit and it's going to look weird, right? Mm-hmm. So there's those sort of sizing things and different aesthetics, and different people have different aesthetics too in terms of what they like and what they don't like. Like for me, I tend to like symmetry. Some people can take it or leave it in terms of how symmetrical things are. For things like scarves, Fair Isle is a little bit tricky with a scarf unless you're going to do it as a tube. And I have knit them as tubes, and boy, they are super warm because you have like 4 layers of yarn in there. And so that works out really well. Gloves and mittens are a ton of fun. I love designing mittens and gloves because you can have, so basically with a glove, you can put a pattern on the back of the hand. You can have a different pattern for the palm. You can have a separate pattern for each of the fingers. And they can look like whatever, whatever you want.
Mhm.
So I end up making a lot of Fair Isle gloves, and they also are fun because they're really warm. Hats are a good project, as you know, for just beginning. A lot of the Fair Isle things I designed, probably the things that I have designed the most are gloves and mittens and sweaters. Just because those are the ones that I make a lot of use out of. Obviously, the type of yarn and the size of yarn you're using also makes a difference, which is why, as Jerry knows, most of the things that I knit with like fingering weight yarn, even if it's a sweater, just because you can have a much more detailed pattern with it. But it also means you've got lots of stitches.
Yeah.
But lots of stitches means that you can have lots of detail. But if you have a pattern that is a fairly simple pattern that you can easily do just you could use a worsted weight yarn and do a Fair Isle project and it would turn out great. You just, when you get down to the planning of it, you just have to be thinking about how many stitches per inch do you have, and how many possible repeats of a pattern are you going to get, or are you going to use an all over pattern? And if so, how well is that going to fit into the size of what you're making and that kind of thing. So size of yarn probably makes more difference than type of yarn, although I know if you're using something like mohair that has a halo, it's going to look a little bit different than if you're using a tightly wound wool of some kind or an acrylic or something where that keep the definition of the yarn way better. So that's going to kind of influence how crisp your pattern stays. So then the main thing in terms of, so then for me, when I'm planning something, I guess I start with what am I making? How big does it have to be? And if it's a sweater, I'll think about, okay, what is it, a pullover? Is it a cardigan? Do I want to have it where it's more the traditional Fair Isle, where it's bands of different patterns? Or do I want it more of an all over one? Like this one is more of an all over pattern that was actually based on a weaving that I did. So I took a weaving pattern and I turned it into a knitting pattern. And then then the next thing as you think about, so once you've decided, okay, I want this to be a banded pattern, or I want this to be an all over, then you can start looking for patterns. I will say two of the places that I end up looking for things the most. One is this book, The Art of Fair Isle Knitting by Ann Feidelson. This is an awesome book. I have used it in a bunch of different, taking the ideas that she has in here and then adapting them to my own purposes. The other book that I really like that is, and I'll show you why, of course, is Alice Starmore's Fair Isle book. The main reason I like it, and I have used it a ton, is for the piece in there where she gives you a whole bunch of just different kinds of Fair Isle patterns. She has probably almost 20 pages of different sizes of patterns, and you can mix them and match them and do whatever you want to with them. So she's got big patterns, she's got all over patterns, she's got all kinds of things. And I have used a number of these in different stuff that I have made, where I just take them and I adjust them to whatever I want to do with them.
That one looks like your sweater a little bit. That one, well, not so much. Never mind. It
I'll
did
tell
on
you,
the paper.
I do have sweaters that look like some because I've used them on there. Actually, you'll see there's one. I've used this one in a sweater.
Oh, that's pretty.
I used this one in a vest that I made for somebody.
Mhm.
I think I used this one in a sweater for somebody too. And then of all of the varying star patterns she has, I have taken those and I have adapted them to other kinds of things.
Cool.
So they all, you know. And so one of the things I do want to talk about, so for example, for banded patterns, and when you're talking about traditional Fair Isle types of patterns, one of the types of patterns that they talk about a lot is kind of an OXO pattern. The one that I sent you is an OXO kind of a pattern, and I will, let me, I'm gonna move some things around a little bit so that I can talk about that of what we did there. Okay, I need to change. Okay, can you guys see that piece of paper?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was the one that I sent you originally. So what you see, you've got a X or an X right here, and you've got an O that's, sorry, this is mirrored in my screen. And then you've got the O here. The thing about having an OXO pattern like this is you can do all kinds of things with it in terms of adjusting sizes and design and things like that. So I was playing with this a little bit. So this is the one, as I told you, is 9 rows by 18 stitches. When you're working on it and you're thinking about how you're going to incorporate it into something, there's basically 2 places where the best place to repeat the pattern. One is from the yellow to the yellow, which is, so from this yellow to that yellow,
Mhm.
that's one repeat of the pattern. And so basically what you'd have is at your seam, if you were doing this like in a hat or a scarf or a hat or a sweater where you join together, this one will just merge right in with this one. Now, keeping in mind that when you're making that join, you're going to have a little bit of a jog. You know, when you're knitting in the round, you always end up having that little place where they don't quite line up the way you want them to when you start from one row to the next row. In which case, if you use the yellow one, you're going to end up with 2 solids right next to each other where that joins. So the other place where you can join it is going from the X to the X. So going from the blue to the blue, it's obviously the same number of stitches, but when you join it, it's going to look a little bit less obvious that you have a join there because you mostly have plain stitches there.
Mhm.
So if I was going to make a choice of where I started my pattern repeat at, if I was going to worry about where it might join together, I would probably start it with the X and then work it and then go through and then you don't have to worry about how all of those little other things come together. Now, that said, there's a whole variety of other kinds of things that you can do with this kind of a pattern. One of the things that's really nice about these patterns is that you can change how many rows and stitches you have in your pattern really easy, just by pushing things closer together or pulling things farther apart and adding rows on each side. So, and you can adjust the pattern to be more or less, you can change what it looks like without really making a whole lot of changes to the rest of it. So for example, this next pattern down here, so I just did some playing before this class just to have some examples to show you guys what to play with. So this next one right here is also 18 stitches by 9 rows. But essentially what I've done is just added a little bit, I've changed out what the O looks like. So it's going to look more of a diamond and less of a you know, every other, more of a solid sort of a deal. And then added in a little bit of decorative thing in here so that up here, you're gonna have a pretty large expanse of your background. And as you know, when you're doing stranded knitting, you generally don't want to go more than about 5 stitches without anchoring things down. So you'd have to anchor this up here, probably here and here. If you add just this little extra thing of stitches here, then you don't have to worry about the anchors. And then you don't have any stretches that are more than 5 stitches. So that's the other thing that I end up looking at when I'm designing the pattern itself is, you know, can I get it so that I don't have long stretches with the same color, where I'm going to have to worry about really long floats. So then let's suppose, okay, you've got a pattern where you need to have, instead of having 18 stitches, I mean, 18 stitches would work great if you're doing something that you had a, you know, multiple of 18 in. Well, suppose you got a sweater that you got 300 stitches in instead. One of the easiest things you could do would be to do like this one that's right here, where you can increase this by adding, you can see this X is the same as that X. I added, instead of having 3 stitches between the O and 3 stitches between the 3 stitches on each side of the O's and the X's, I put 4. If you put 4 in there, then you have 20 stitches per inch or 20 stitches in your repeat. And so when you have a pattern with 300 stitches, you've now got 20 stitches and it goes in there even.
Lot to think about here.
And so, and you will, I very seldom end up doing the same. When I do a stripy sweater like this, I will very frequently not do any 2 stripes exactly the same. And one of the ways you can do that is, for instance, you could take this one, you've got your every other row. So you've got this sort of this, not quite solid, but kind of a semi-solid sort of a diamond here, or O. This one, you've got just an outline. So it's going to look like more of just an open diamond. Down here, I ended up just having the outline of it here, and then filled it in with this little guy in the middle. So it's going to be like a diamond inside of a diamond. And so essentially you're really not changing the design in any substantial way. You're just making little tweaks all the way around. Now let's suppose that you have one that where you have fewer stitches and you need a skinnier one. Well, so this one here, that now I put only 2 stitches between the O and the X. And then I mushed in I essentially made it so that there's only 5 stitches here across the top of the X and only 1 in the middle. So basically I just made the X skinny. And now that with that X being skinny and having the O and the X be closer together, you now have, your pattern is only 14 stitches. So you could so you could get it to fit into a repeat that, instead of 300, if you had 280, you could use this 14 stitch repeat and it would fit into 280 stitches. And then let's suppose that you have thing where you really, you need to make it substantially bigger. So so this one is basically now 24 stitches by 11 rows. And the only thing I did with it was I left the O and the X 4 stitches apart. So I sort of started with this one. Or maybe, actually, I probably started with this one where it was the 20 stitches. And essentially I pulled the X apart so that this part is now what was over here. And this X, which you kind of started the X here, I just pulled it apart so that that single stitch X is the primary. I pulled it apart so it makes a full X. And then pulled these off to the side. So you still have an X. It's just, it's a slightly, you know, I just kind of took the whole thing and I pulled it apart.
That's cool. Would never have put all this together.
Yeah, me too.
And then the other thing with the O's and the X's is you can also just add rows to them really easy. So in this case, I added an extra row on the top, which meant that I just expanded out my diamond by 1. And I can see I didn't quite finish it. Those would be solid right here too. But I kept it as just an outline with 2 stitches, and then I put this single diamond in the middle. And once I expanded this X, this center X far enough, I ended up with a really long stretch across there. So I just put this little other, you know, sort of a half diamond in there to cover that up. And depending on what you wanted, you could have that be an open diamond, or you could fill in that center one and have it be solid. So whether you want something to be solid or an outline makes a whole bunch of opportunities for different things that you can do. Whoops. Does that all make sense?
Yes, it's great.
Yeah.
So then once you have your pattern, then you get to start thinking about colors. Although one thing I will, and this was something that I noticed as I was putting this together, and I've noticed it before, is generally speaking, when you're using these traditional sort of OXO patterns, you're going to have an odd number of rows and an even number of stitches. And you really have to do some, you may have to make things kind of weird to make them be the other. You know, so if you needed a thing with an even number of rows, that's gonna be a little bit trickier to come by in this kind of a traditional thing. You'd probably end up having something like this one where your X is going to have 2 of the 3, and then 2 of the, so that your O would have two things on the outside and 2 of these narrowest things in the middle, in order to make it be an even number. And me being a symmetrical person, sometimes, I mean, I've done it, but I don't know that it's necessarily always my favorite. A lot of times I would rather adjust my stitch count by a little bit in order to make it work. And so the other thing that I have found, if you're designing something and you have multiple different designs, and they don't all go exactly into the number of stitches that you have, you can add or subtract usually 2 or 3 or 4 stitches between motifs, and you can never tell. So I had a pattern that I did that had, I think I had to decrease 2 or 3 before one of them, and then I had to increase again after it to go in, move into the next one. And those are, for the most part, those are totally invisible and nobody knows except you. Okay, so that's sort of the design piece of things. All over patterns are a little bit trickier because let's look at well, let me mention this one here first too, before we go to the. So a lot of times with Fair Isle patterns, they use a star in place of an O. And stars work really well fitting in place of an O. They obviously make for a larger pattern, but like if you look at this particular one here, you could make this narrower by pulling in where from this 2-line deal here to this which way this 2-line deal over here, you could smush those things together significantly and have that, and you'd have way less background color. So it would end up being, the pattern would be a little bit more intense if you mush it together some. So that would be where you'd be wanting to think about, okay, how much of that background color do you want to show? Do you really want to have an open background like that, or do you want a busier background? And it would depend also on what you're making. If you're making something that is, you know, if you're using a larger yarn, you're going to have fewer stitches. So you're probably going to have to pull it together a little bit because that's in order to make it fit. So when you're thinking about all over patterns, which they're fun, but they're also a little bit tricky to do. And I'm going to see whether my little rig here that I've got for holding up papers is going to work for me. Okay, I'm going to have to hold that up because it's about to fall over. It's too heavy. Okay, so now let's look at this center one. In this particular case, I marked off what the pattern repeat actually is. So this is the actual pattern repeat in this square. So in order to get the full pattern, you know, it's actually a fairly large number of stitches and a fairly large number of rows in order to do it. And then when you're planning your project, you've got to figure out, okay, where do I want to start and stop this at the beginning and at the shoulders, or whatever it is that you're making, to be able to figure out, you know, sort of how am I going to make this fit in my project? And I don't, so this is a 24, looks like 24 stitches by 28 rows. So you'd have to work through what that looks like for whatever you're making to figure out how many rows are you going to need, how many stitches are you going to need to be able to make that fit. Generally speaking, it ends up being easier on, like if you're using it for a sweater, it tends to be a little bit easier on a pullover, because when you get to the end of the pattern from here to here, it will just blend one into the other, and then you don't really have to worry about it. Doing it for a cardigan, you have to figure out, okay, if I start it on one side of the cardigan here, then I need to end it at the other side of the cardigan over here, so that it looks the same on both sides of the front, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and have stitches for the seam as well.
Yeah, unless you do it in the round, which I
Yeah,
always,
right.
but then you also have to think about, okay, if you're going to do a 3-needle bind off at the shoulder, which is what I almost always do, have you centered it, and do you have the right number of stitches such that they're going to come together at the same place at the shoulder?
Yeah.
And that tends to be a little on the tricky side. Okay, any questions you guys are thinking about in terms of pattern related stuff?
No,
And
not so far.
sizing and things like that. Okay, let's think about colors here. Like I said, I've got lots and lots of swatches, and I have used patterns multiple times so that sometimes I can show you pretty contrasting ways of how I've dealt with different patterns. So let's use this. This one is an all over pattern that I have done okay, this keeps getting backwards here. Sorry, it's mirrored on the screen, so I have to look at it a different way. Okay, so this is the same pattern. The main difference between the two obviously they're totally different colorway. The other difference is that the one has a light yarn on a darker background, and the other one, and the green one, has a dark pattern on a lighter background. In the case of the green one, the dark green, I used the same color of dark green throughout the whole thing that I made, and then just varied the background behind it to make the differences in color. Now, if you had the right color of a variegated yarn, you could use just a variegated yarn behind that darker pattern. And in the case of this pink one, the background yarn actually is a variegated yarn, which is why it's got little smidges of gray and other different kinds of colors in it. I don't know if you can see it well enough to see, but it is a variegated yarn. So basically it was two colors of yarn. It was the white that I used for the stars, and then it was the pinky color background that has sort of rose and pink and gray. The only thing to really keep in mind if you're using a variegated yarn is that you want to make sure that there's no place in the variegation that is too similar to what you're using for your contrasting color. Because if you do have something where, say you've got a variegated yarn that's got just a little bit of a light stripe in it, when you put it against, when it runs up against that light pattern, that light contrast color, your design is going to kind of fade off into the background and you won't see it. And so it won't be as crisp of a look as you might want.
Mhm.
So the other thing to be thinking about with your pattern is how much contrast do you want between your colors. It can be very contrasty if you want, or it can be not very contrasty at all. So let's take a look at two more things here. Okay, so both of these are also swatches for sweaters. Obviously, if you use I like contrast. So the white and the turquoise and the purple. So this one is very contrasty because I used a white background, and then I put a dark purple, a lighter purple, and a dark teal. And those colors would not surprise Jerry at all about me, because that's what I do a lot with purple and teal because I really like them. But
That's amazing, the difference in those, what the colors do.
yeah, and so then the darker purple one, you know, I have the dark purple is my background. And then I have sort of almost a denim blue and a sort of a blue teal mix. And then another teal color here too. They just are enough in terms of different value that you can still see the pattern, but it's not nearly as in your face as the other one is. And so depending on whether you really like that in your face, I want to be able to really see this pattern, or whether you want to, yeah, I really like these colors, but I really want to have them blend in a little bit more subtle way. This one was also one that I experimented because I wanted to try and use an all over pattern, but I didn't want it to, I added some extra to it. So the sweater that I have has, this is the front and the back. And then it has, this is basically starts toward the side, and then this is what's under each arm. And then the same with the sleeve has, I think the sleeve has one repeat of this, and then this is most of the rest of it underneath. Okay.
So I have a question.
Yes.
In the highly contrasted one, it looks like you're using, you know, in some rows, you know, 3 different colors of yarn, and like the teals are widely spaced. So how do you deal with that? Do you?
Actually, I only have 2 colors of yarn in any one of these.
Oh, okay.
So let's get it a little closer so you can see it closer. So this is actually, this is just made out of, this is made out of sock yarn. And so the teals are kind of spaced out. Let me see if I can put this on something where I can.
Jean,
It's in
Yeah.
the other direction, actually.
Jean, hold the sample like you knitted it. That might help, Catherine.
That's what I just realized is
Yeah.
the other direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me get my little stand here so we can hold it, maybe have it stay where it needs to go.
Okay,
Yeah.
now I can see it.
Yeah, so this is this is the way I knitted it, was this way.
Okay.
Ah, sorry.
Yeah, okay, now that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, sorry about that. That makes sense, because this is actually kind of it makes kind of a round pattern,
Uh-huh.
which it would make it hard to tell which is which.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't do very well dealing with mirror images, I'm finding.
Tell you don't know where to point your pen.
I know, exactly. I should not be using the screen. I should be using the board is what I ought to be doing. So let me show you another example of where you get a very different look depending on what colors with the same pattern. These 2 are the same pattern.
Wow.
I knitted this one first. And I knitted it because I was wanting something that was purple, and actually the idea behind this is sort of mountains reflecting into a pond like at sunset sort of thing. That was my image that was in my head when I was thinking about that one. But again, it is sort of an OXO kind of a pattern, because it's got, this is basically just taken I took the X and just kind of pushed the O's closer together, but the X is still sort of there.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can see them if you point it out.
So the final product with that one, I was actually going for something that was more purple, but because of the nature of the orange that's in there, the overall sweater is really orange. And because I made it when I weighed about 25 or 30 pounds more than I do now, it's also way too big now. So I decided I was going to redo that pattern and use different colors for it. And so that was when I did this one and came up with a different color values for it. And used more of probably more subtle colors, but essentially what I have is the background is sort of a muted, kind of a tealish sort of color that has some blending in with a little bit with purple. And then it's kind of a purple heather here, and then it mutes in, goes into sort of a, I guess this is sort of a tealish, purplish heather kind of a color. These are all Jamieson and Smith yarns, by the way, which if for Fair Isle knitting, Jamieson and Smith yarns are awesome because they have colors that are heathered with other colors. And so you can get almost you can make it look like a variegated yarn in whatever colors you want, because you can get how the colors that they have that blend from one to the other. And they have many colors, and they're designed for this kind of knitting. So both of these are actually out of Jamieson and Smith yarns. And actually, no, I guess that's not true. I was thinking that one of these colors, like this one, might actually be the same color as this one, but I'm not sure that that's true. And then for the upper up above, what I really did is I kind of changed around which one was my pattern and which one was my background. So the pattern for this one, the pattern that makes the O and the X here, was sort of a very light blue, and then a tan color, and then a white. So then when I got up to this upper part, I put the light blue, the tan, and the white in the background instead of as the pattern, and then use these same colors that I had in the background and use them as my pattern.
Mhm.
On my
so-
screen, it looks like shades of gray.
It
more.
does to mine too, but I can kind of see the bluish in the background.
Yeah, a
lower.
little bit of bluish, but it's very attractive, but it's very subtle color changes.
Yes, it is. And it's even in real life, it's sort of, they are sort of muted in that they do have sort of a grayish look to them.
Yeah, cool.
So one of the things that I have found as you're looking at what you want to do, just changing what you use as the background and what you use as the pattern, and alternating if you're doing multiple different bands, alternate which ones you do as the pattern and which ones you do as the background, can make it kind of pulls the whole thing together without having a huge change of anything. But you can still get very different looks, but it still ties together because it's still all the same color. And then this color that divides it, that makes the chevron kind of color here, is kind of a maroon color. So and it's the only place I use that maroon color, is just as the divider in between. So Catherine, you were mentioning that you use a lot of sort of natural colored wools.
I have traditionally, when I've used color, I've followed the pattern and just used the colors that they suggest. So, yeah.
But you can make some really pretty things using just natural wools too.
Mhm.
These are ones that I did when I was doing some swatching for a alpaca sweater that I made for a friend of mine. And you could see I was also kind of playing with I also try and like to figure out how to do vertical things instead of everything being horizontal, because not everybody looks great with horizontal stripes.
Yeah.
So I play around a lot with trying to figure out how to take a pattern and make it so that it's got some verticality to it.
Mhm.
So you can do some really nice things with natural colors. Probably the main thing to figure out, and as you've seen in a couple of these swatches, what you can do is if you took just like a dark brown, like this one up here, and then use the dark brown all the way through as probably your pattern, and then had like maybe a tan and a white to give some differentiation in the background. And actually this one is kind of like that too, because this has a gray and then a tan and then a white, which are fairly natural colors. Only I use them as the pattern, and then I had them on a solid darker, I guess it's kind of a darker brown. So you can get a nice look even not using all that many different colors if you want to. It's just a matter of, figuring out, do you want to have a dark pattern on a lighter background, or do you want to have a lighter background on a lighter pattern on a darker background? And do you want to vary the background? Do you want to vary the pattern colors? Do you want to just do a solid, the same colors all the way through?
Mhm. Hmm.
What other kinds of questions about colors are you thinking about?
I don't know enough to even ask how many. No, I don't know. I picked out 6 different colors that I have in front of me, but I wouldn't begin to know how to use them exactly.
Okay. Oh, sorry, my computer just crashed. Hang on. having some issues here. Okay, so let's go back to the patterns that we started with
Mhm.
for a second here. And let me tell you what I will usually do when I'm putting colors into things. A lot of times what I will do is I'll take, so say for example, I wanted to use this motif in something. What I would probably do is I would probably think about, okay, I've got 11 rows here. I would think about, okay, how much contrast, what do my colors look like? So how much contrast is there between, do I have some of the colors that sort of blend fairly well so that they would make a good continuity between say for the pattern, do I have colors that it makes sense for them to be together making the pattern? Or do I really only have one color that is a good contrast behind some of my other colors? In which case, maybe I want to have either just a solid background or I want to have a single color for the pattern. And then I'll figure out what to do with the other colors. And normally, go ahead.
Well, that's where I'm at. I can decide on a background and a design color, but a lot of the Fair Isle patterns that I've seen have multiple colors, within the design.
Mhm.
And I'm not one that I belong to a Fair Isle Facebook group that's international that I've been playing with over COVID. And some of those gals, they'll show a sweater they finished and they will be the strangest color combinations you've ever seen. And that is not me. I want mine to look like some of them look like they use scraps and they just put them in there willy-nilly, and that isn't me. And Jean, I've seen your stuff and it never looks like that. It always looks very orderly and put together. And that's what I'd like to bring to mine, my Fair Isle work, but I'm not sure how to do that. Sometimes they'll show like just an odd color, like maybe a red line of stitches right through the middle of your X and O there, which that's not such a big deal. But what do you use in the above and below kind of thing that gives it that kind of Fair Isle look, but is not, a different color? How do we decide what that different color should
What
be?
that different color is. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that totally makes sense. This swatch that I made is probably one of the ones that has the biggest gradation between the colors.
Mhm.
So that, the dark purple and the light purple are really of pretty different values.
Mhm.
And the dark purple and the teal are probably maybe a little closer, but there's still a lot of contrast between those three colors too. Which is why when I did that one, I decided I was not going to do, I'm going to turn my screen around so that so that I can see you guys. Let's see. Now I need to figure out how to get rid of the spotlight thing here too.
I can do that. You keep talking and I'll unspot.
Okay. So one of the reasons that I decided to use a solid background on that one was because there was enough contrast just between those three colors that if I had done anything different with the background, it would have been hugely busy and then it would not have gone well.
Yeah.
I guess usually, I think probably the thing to do would be let's look at some of the colors that you guys chose and talk about what would you want to do with the colors that you have.
Jerry, you're first. Or you want me to go first? What am I
Oh,
doing?
thanks. I just sort of went by what I had.
Yeah, me too.
Well, so pull up what you have, and then let's talk about if you were going to try and make that into something, would you need to get some different colors to go with something, or could you make something work with what you have?
So I have three kind of gray, dark gray, light gray, black. And then I have light green, dark green, and kind of a peach. And I have no plans for how that would go together. I have done a baby sweater using these three. That's why I have it left over.
Yeah.
And this is actually Cascade 220, so it's bigger than I would actually use for a Fair Isle. But so that's what I have is those kind of muted colors, and then the three, the green and the peach. And a white background is what I get.
Okay. So I went with the background of this, and I don't know if you can see it, it's navy.
Dark blue, yeah.
Because I was thinking, well, if I had a hat, I was thinking hat. I make a lot of hats.
Okay.
And I was thinking for a hat, a dark hat is what I would wear. And then I actually have a light blue that goes with it, but I have all these other fun colors. I don't have a problem with stash at all.
Well, when you're doing Fair Isle, having a big stash is good because then you can pull and play and you've got lots of choices.
I didn't even think of using natural colors. I do have a whole bunch of alpaca that's in all Jan's shades of colors too. But anyway, I went with this. This is Patton's classic wool, and I figured I wanted it as big as possible on my needles so I could see what I was doing instead of yarn or sock weight yarn, but I think that's probably what you would use or more, 2 or a size 2 weight yarn for some. I have used Jameson's. That is wonderful, and it hooks the yarns kind of hooked together really.
The yarn is sticky, so
Yeah.
if you're doing a steek, you don't have to worry about things unraveling very far.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Alpaca, when you're doing a steek, it likes to fly apart. a little bit.
Yeah, that's a different thing. That's why I never thought of it for this.
Okay, so Jerry, with your dark blue, you've got your dark blue, pull up what you have that you would think are the, would you want to have, so the question is, would you want to have it be only dark blue all the way through? Or would you want to try and add some differentiation in the background as well? And if you do, then I would say, look at your dark blue, and then maybe if you have like a dark green or a dark gray.
Oh, okay. Yes, I have a darker green, or I don't know if I like this one as well. I have 2 colors of kind of a green, one's more of a teal.
I would probably be more inclined to go with the sort of the tealier color, because it's going to blend probably a little bit better with the blue.
Okay. Okay, we'll see.
Okay, so that would be the other color that you might consider as a background color.
Okay.
So the other thing that comes up, if you're going to use multiple background colors and multiple pattern colors, then the question becomes, okay, where are you going to divide when you change your background colors and when you change your pattern colors?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And generally what I do is, because the row count is usually an odd number, at least it is if you're using a pretty traditional kind of a Fair Isle pattern. Usually what I will do is I will take like I usually work from the middle of the pattern out to the edges. So I will take, I'm gonna pull the pattern back up here again. So if we were using just the one that we started with, where we have 9 rows, I would probably look at it, let's say I have 2 background colors and I have 3 pattern colors. Okay. So what I would probably do for my background is I would probably have the center 5 be one color, and then the 2 on either side to the outside be a different color. And you also get a very different look if you have the lighter of your background colors in the middle versus the lighter background colors on the outside. I'm just going to see if I can find an example.
Oh, what did you just say about doing it lighter in the middle or darker in the middle?
It looks pretty different depending on what you do.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to find an example here where I can show you what I did. Actually, let's use this pattern right here. has really, it goes from the lighter color on the outside to the darker color on the middle, in the middle, for
Mhm.
both the pattern and for the background.
Mhm.
Okay, so you've got this lighter bluish color, you're starting out here with white. Generally, because the lighter colors are gonna be, you're gonna get better contrast throughout if you have lighter on lighter and darker on darker. If that makes sense. When I did it the first time, I had darker colors on the outside and lighter colors on the inside. So it really makes kind of a difference in terms of where the where the pop is, I guess, kind of. Although this one I did put a pretty dark teal right through the center for just one row on this one, that it was sort of my dividing line, I guess, kind of between my mountains and my reflection. Right.
So Jean, should we, I'm just thinking ahead a little bit here. Should we make a sample like that of what our idea is before we do it?
Yes. I almost always do a swatch before I do the real thing. And there are some cases where I've ended up making 2 or 3 swatches before I was happy with what I had. Or I make my swatch and I realize, oh yeah, that color really doesn't work. I don't want to use that. And then I come up with a different one that I know will work relatively well. So thinking back to how we're making a division of colors on this pattern. So like I said, if you have 2 background colors and 3 pattern colors, I would probably do the center 5 as one of your background colors, and then the outside 2 would be your other pattern color. And then you're probably going to have a solid row of that same pattern color before and after that band, right? Because you're going to have a divider between the 2. And then what I would do, because I generally, as a general rule, I don't change both colors at the same time.
You
For
mean the pattern versus the background?
Yes.
Okay.
I will usually change one and then I'll change the other. So then if you've got 3 pattern colors, I would probably take, well, it depends. Since we only have 9, we have 9 rows here. I would say you could use maybe 1 color as the far outside and then do 3 and 3. Does that work? 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3. That would be a question as to whether for just a 9-row pattern, having 3 pattern colors might be too many.
Well, if you put 1 row different right down the center,
Yeah.
you might be able to get.
Yeah, if you put one right down the center, and then you did the next 3, and then had this color, then this color on the outside would be your 3rd color. Part of this, the decisions you make also depend on how wedded you are to the colors you have.
Yeah.
And or how wedded you are to the pattern you have. Because using this pattern down here where you've got 11 rows would give you a lot more opportunity to change your colors in and out. Because you've got more room to be able to you know, you could take the same 5 in the center or even take 7 in the middle. Because you've got 11 rows, so you could take 5 or 7, depends on how much you like the color.
Yeah, okay.
And then do either 2 on each side on the outside or do 3 on the outside.
What do you do with the space between your rows of pattern then?
You know, that depends. I have done a number of different things depending on what my patterns looked like. Hang on just a second here. I will often put in, and it also depends on how different the next set of patterns is. You know,
Okay.
so for example, if I make, I'm looking for a particular swatch, so I'm trying to figure out where it is. Hang on, I'm gonna be right back.
So while Jean's away, Jerry, what I've started doing is I use hats to do a sort of final swatch to check to see how I like either cables or Fair Isle. And then I get a usable product out of my swatch.
Yeah,
Well, that works unless you're trying to do an overall pattern,
Oh, yes, that is true. Yes,
in which case you might have a little bit of a harder time.
very true.
it's
Um,
funny that you say that, Elizabeth, though. When I learned how to knit and crochet, I was taught to make a sample swatch of everything I did. So what Jean is saying about making just a swatch to save sort of appeals to me in a sense of saving it for later to refer back to. But anyway, that's funny that you, but
Well,
I get that. My cat has stolen most of my swatches. She finds them no matter how hard I find them, and she thinks they're toys.
I don't
well,
have
yeah,
that
that would be a thing. Here's the one I was looking for. See, mine are all in a basket, and I do refer back to them once in a while when I'm thinking about, okay, well, what did that look like? So for example, let's look at this particular swatch. So I made a sweater that has,
Oh,
and actually, Jerry, I think you've seen this sweater. This was one of the first Fair Isle sweaters I designed. So it has sort of a semi-star pattern up here. And then I will frequently use some little small Peary patterns in between.
mm-hmm.
And
like
so this sweater has like this bigger pattern, then it has this little pattern that repeats frequently. Then another little small pattern, and then this one that's basically a repeat of that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then a different kind of basically a triangle type deals here. And each one of these is different,
Mm-hmm.
but they're all separated. So basically I have one of these diamond guys, then this, then this, then this, then a star guy, and then back to this, and then back to this.
Yeah.
So a good way to, the other thing that I have done, if I am taking, here's another example. The other thing that I will sometimes do, so this was a swatch I did for the yoke of a sweater that I was going to do. A lot of times if I am doing something where I have basically one color of background and pattern, and then I'm moving to, say, reversing those two, I will just do one that's every other one of the new color that I'm moving to. So you end up with a solid of what was. You have every other one with both. Then you have a solid of the new one, and then you move into whatever your next one's going to be. And so it just gives you a little bit of a transition
Okay.
between the two background colors. But one of the reasons that I like that Alice Starmore book with all of her library of all of her little patterns is because she has a whole bunch of little, you know, 1-row period patterns, 2-row period patterns, 3-row period patterns. It really can give you some really good ideas of things to put in between, because it's nice to think about, particularly if you were going to use like this larger 11-row pattern. What you might want to do is to have one like this that's a kind of a bigger 11-row pattern, have a solid row, put in a little 3-row pattern that's, you know, maybe 3 or 4 stitches, another solid row, and then maybe put in one that a row that's maybe only 7 or 5 or 7 stitches, and then repeat your little period pattern again, and then go back to another bigger pattern, and then just alternate between those, and then you end up with a nice variation of different patterns that are still pretty unified based on how you're putting your colors together, and that the patterns are somewhat similar in style, kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Okay.
But yes, I almost always do a swatch before I do something. And I usually keep them all, partially because a lot of times I'm not buying a whole lot of extra yarn. I'm buying just enough to be able to make whatever my project is. And so I don't necessarily want to make a ginormous kind of a swatch. My swatches very frequently are not much bigger than a 4x4 or a 4x5, depending on how much of the pattern I need to be able to see.
Cool.
So the other thing to think about, or the other thing that, at least for me, I think about it a lot because I make a lot of sweaters. And one of the things to think about is for the ribbing on your sweater, for either the cuff, for the sleeve, for the cuff, for the bottom, for are you going to do a solid color, or do you want to do a 2-color ribbing? I am also a big fan of 2-color ribbings. Just because I think they make for they add a lot of visual interest.
Mhm.
So for example, which is generally, you can do that easiest just by a knit 2, purl 2. And one set of colors is your pearls, and one set of colors is your knits. I think generally what I end up doing is I use the background pattern for the knits, and I use the pattern colors for the pearls. But again, you get a kind of a different look depending on whether you're going from dark on the outside to light on the inside, or light on the inside to dark on the other way around. And whether or not you're going to vary both sets of colors, or whether you're just going to vary one set of colors. And I have done it both ways. Generally, what ends up happening is, depending on how contrasty your yarn is against itself, usually what happens for mine, I'm thinking through all of my various projects. I think usually I will end up having both the pattern and the background go, it's frequently from dark to light in the middle. I don't usually probably have one go from dark to light and the other go from light to dark. Because what ends up happening is when you have I need to make sure I'm thinking this through here. You end up with sort of if you have the dark, let's see, we've got dark to light, light to dark. You can end up where you lose some distinction between the two at some point, depending on which ones you're doing and depending on the values of your yarn. And I will sometimes test that out just by twisting the yarn together and see what they look like together.
So are you saying that if your pattern has dark in the middle and then goes out to light on the edges, that you would do the same thing with the background? You'd also have the background dark in the middle going out to light on the edges? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, that is what we're talking about.
Okay.
And I'm trying, and now that I'm thinking about it in my head, I'm trying to decide whether that is what I do or not.
Go to that, your sweater pattern that you did in the orange and purple versus the other one that you did lighter for a minute, because that had what you're talking about, I think.
I think it probably did.
Yeah, and I thought I liked the grayish ones.
Okay, everything tipped over. Okay, I'm gonna lay these down and I'm gonna tip my camera so that we can see them.
There you go. Okay. Yes, so the one with the orange looks like it's dark to light,
Yes, it is.
and then the purple is dark to light, but the design is also dark to light.
Right. And I did this, and I did light to dark. Both for the gray one, for the more of a muted one, I did light to dark for both pattern and background on the big pattern. And I did dark to light on the smaller pattern. So I did one way and then I did the other one the other way. So this one has the darker colors. Although this one, it looks a little bit different because I also changed out my background, ended up using the lighter colors. Right, so it changes the feel of this pattern because it is most of the background is now lighter than the, whereas this one, I've got my darker colors as my background and I've got my lighter colors as the pattern.
Yeah, I think I like that one better, but it might just be the contrast that's not necessarily because of the way you did the.
Well, the thing is that for the whole sweater, the sweater goes from this to this, and then this whole thing repeats several times. So what you end up with is a larger, these larger patterns are going to be the ones that end up being the predominant feel of the sweater. And I tend to, when I think through a lot of what I make, I tend to have my darker colors in the background. Just because I, like you, Jerry, I kind of like that look better.
Yeah.
And so then I end up having the ones like this one where it's lighter. One, they tend to be smaller. But this also puts it so that really the real light color only takes like a couple of rows here. And this is an example where this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitch pattern right here, or 7 row pattern. And I ended up using 3 colors of, I had 3 background colors, and I think I used 1, 2 colors of the pattern color. So I had 2 rows of this darker purple and then 3 rows of this to make up the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay.
And then I just had the 1 row of white in the middle. So with those narrow kind of bands like that, frequently you may end up with just 1 row of a color.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then the purple one, so this one that was mostly orange, I went from dark to light. Sorry, this is snagging on here. I went from dark to light in both pattern and background, and then I went from dark to light in this one too. So I did both of these the same as opposed to opposites like I did on this one.
Definitely the O's on the grayish one stand out more than the other one.
They do, and one of the reasons they do is because on this orange one,
Yeah, you've got the darker.
the contrast between this orange and this orange
Yeah,
is more substantial.
yeah,
So the more your pattern is going to be more cohesive if you have the contrast colors between your, so the contrast between your pattern colors, if there's more contrast, they're going to feel less cohesive than if they blend smoothly from one to the other, if that makes sense.
yeah.
And that is one of the reasons where using Jameson and Smith yarn is really nice, because they do have, their colors are such that you can blend them so that it's almost invisible that it's different yarn colors.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where depending on what you want to make. That's where if you can find a good variegated yarn that has nice contrast against a solid and just use those 2 colors.
Yeah.
You can sometimes let the variegated yarn do the kind of do the heavy lifting in terms of the color. As long as you make sure that there's no place in that variegated yarn that is about the same color as what your pattern color is. Because then you end up with spots where it sort of fades away and you can't see the pattern. I don't think I have ever put a variegated yarn with another variegated yarn. Just because I think you would end up with stuff ending up pretty muddy if you do that. I will also say that heathery colors work better in most cases for going from blending from one to the next, where you have really stark differences in color. Generally speaking, you're gonna want to plan your pattern so that those differences are okay. You know, sort of getting back to this pattern. You know, those are solid colors. And there really isn't much of a, and because I was just using sock yarn on this one too, I didn't really have a color that I could find that would blend closer between this one and the dark purple. So it ended up, you know, so depending on how you look at this, you can almost look at this where you've got this purple stripe right here, and then you've got the rest of it up above, as opposed to the whole thing being kind of a contiguous whole sort of a thing. I probably would have liked this better if I could have found a color of purple for here that was maybe closer in value to this, but enough different that it still looked different.
No, I kind of think it looks okay, at least the colors as they appear on the screen.
I mean, I like it. It's a sweater I actually wear quite a bit because I do like it. But I think it was one that I would not have put I wouldn't have put anything else against it except a white, because otherwise.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah,
It would have been a problem.
yeah.
So at this point, let's see, we could take a short break if you want. We have another hour and a half approximately. I wouldn't mind taking a little break. Maybe come back in about 10 minutes. And then we'll maybe dig into the colors that you guys have and do some planning for what you might want to do with your colors and putting them into your swatches.
Okay.
Okay.
So I will pause the recording. Let me know when you're ready to start it up again.
Okay. So so the next step for you two is to take your yarns that you have, and let's just say we're going to use that first pattern, the one that I sent to you. Take, say, 2 colors that you think you want to use in the background and 2 that you will use in the pattern.
2 in the background.
And then pull them up and we'll talk about them a little bit. So I would say for your probably find 2 that go relatively well that are kind of dark, and 2 that go together fairly well that are light or lighter. They don't have to be super light, but they can be lighter.
So these could be the
Those-
background,
Uh-huh.
and then maybe
Okay.
these could be the pattern, or
Yeah, and I would say now take those 2 that you have that you're thinking about for pattern. Grab the 2 that you're thinking about for the background. Now, what I will usually do, and actually you've got good contrast against those, so I think those four would work really well together. But what I usually do is I take the 2 that the colors that I'm thinking about for background and the colors that I'm thinking about for pattern, and I put them next to each other, kind of together like you have them,
yeah,
just to make sure that there's not some place where there's not going to be enough contrast, or that something looks really weird.
okay.
But
so-
I would say for that group that you have, those look pretty good. I would say
Okay.
those would make a good
Okay.
Now, Catherine, what did you use as for your beginning of the homework part?
Oh, it's the light, the gray.
Okay,
So
okay, so essentially what you're gonna do then is you'll move from the gray to the white.
white and then to the gray. Okay.
Yeah.
And use this as the background. I mean, the pattern.
Well, or you can use both of those other colors as the background and just decide where you would want to make the division.
Okay,
Okay.
this is what I'm going to use.
Yeah, I think that looks good. Now the pink is gonna pop a little bit.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay,
Not a problem. Okay.
so what I'm gonna have you do is work through the way you have it now with your two background colors, your two pattern colors. And then after you do the pattern that way, I want you to turn around and do it the opposite way. Where you have the ones that you're currently doing as your background, I want you to use as your pattern. And then that way you'll get to be able to see, here's what it looks like one way and here's what it looks like the other way.
Okay.
This is gonna take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how big you made your
I made mine 50.
Yeah, that's mine. Mine is 50 also.
Okay, so now here's the other thing. Is if you have, let's see, 50, the pattern only has 18 stitches in it.
Yeah.
So it's not gonna come out even,
No, that's okay.
but that's okay because this is just a swatch.
Quit early. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so 36 from 50.
12.
So where's, okay, so we should start with that part of the X.
Let's see, so in 50 stitches, you'll end up getting 2 full repeats.
Right.
So I would probably say you might start with the very beginning of the O.
Okay.
So right at the last stitch of the X and then work through the
Okay.
2 stitches and then you'll be pretty close to having it'll be close to centered on your 50.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Elizabeth, this might end up being kind of boring. For the
It's okay.
recording.
The other class is having problems, so I'm working with them right now, so.
Okay.
Okay, so this recording may have some big gaps here at the end. but that's okay.
People can speed through them.
That's true, they can. Yeah, luckily, we're not having any technical issues.
No, it's going great.
Yeah, when I was coming up with this little pattern for you guys to come up with, I couldn't decide how big to make it, but I thought, because I wanted you to have time to do it, but I also,
No, it's a good size because it gives us an idea of what we're trying to do.
so while you guys are doing that, I will take some of these patterns, these alternative patterns that we talked about,
Uh-huh,
and I will put them in a document and send them to you.
okay,
Cool.
great.
So did you guys do any of the other North Country classes?
I haven't, no.
I did the beginning Fair Isle. But that was all. The other one I was interested in was a two-part one, and then I think the second part conflicted with this one. So, excuse me a minute, I need a Kleenex.
Yeah, there was another one I was interested in, but it conflicted with part of what I was teaching, so I couldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I really miss the in-person because, well, one, I don't mind having the classes be online because I think, other than, sometimes they have technical difficulties or something, but the, not having the vendors online, I think I miss that because you don't get to see here where we are, as you know, Jean, we don't have a lot of nearby vendor type things going
That's
on.
right.
And so then unless you go to a fiber festival like North Country, you don't get to see all the varieties of products. And sure,
Right.
you can order them from some of the vendors. They've had some stuff going on, but it's not the same as seeing their booth and feeling the fibers and all that.
No, it's really not. You're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. So I miss that quite a bit.
I did enjoy the vendor presentations though, because often you just kind of poke through a booth for 5 minutes and then leave. And to
Yeah.
hear them talk about their products, I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and I actually have not done that. So I should have.
But you can go back and watch.
I think they have them recorded, I think, online. I don't know how long they'll stay there though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have them. I have not put up, I'm really behind because of the South Dakota Library Association conference. But they should all be up hopefully by tomorrow afternoon. We'll keep them up for a while. One of the things that's come out of this is everybody who's gone to those vendor demos has really liked them. And one suggestion was that we have in-person demos when we have an in-person conference. So we have like a vendor spotlight, and at 1:30 in the afternoon, this vendor is going to, present on their stuff. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think it's
that's a good idea.
yeah.
I have to admit though, the weaving class that I'm teaching, it would be really hard to do it in person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did it work out okay with the 3 sessions?
So far, I mean, you can ask Elizabeth and see what she thinks.
Ah.
I have one more tomorrow as
Okay.
the last one.
Yeah, because it
Yeah.
was kind of an experiment.
Yeah, I've really liked it. I am not nearly where I ought to be. Again, there's just so much in life going on right now. If I weren't on the board and trying to run all of these programs, I might have my thing woven, but I don't. But nonetheless, again, we're recording the classes so we can come back and watch it, which is going to be really nice too.
So the other thing I should mention as you guys are working away and when you're thinking in terms of your planning related stuff is that the gauge for Fair Isle tends to be a little bit different than the gauge for regular knitting. The so as you know, if you generally in regular knitting, you've got fewer stitches per inch than you have rows per inch. So it ends up being kind of rectangular. No, the other way around. You usually end up with more rows per inch than you have stitches per inch. Fair Isle tends to be square. So if you insert, you know, like I've done a couple of times where you take and maybe you put a Fair Isle band on a sleeve. I have found that in order to keep that sleeve, the band in the sleeve from being tighter than the rest of it, I usually knit it on a needle one size larger. And you know, depending on how you're adding it into something, the difference for the number of rows might not matter. But knowing that you're going to end up with your gauge is going to be more square is helpful to know, is helpful for you when you're figuring out how many rows you're going to need. It makes picking up a button band easier though, because you can pick up every row as opposed to picking up like every 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4. So how are you liking what you're seeing so far?
Mine's all messed up. Just because I wasn't following the pattern right. And Yeah,
Oh, oops.
I'll have to, do this another time, I think.
Well, I'm doing it, but I don't like the colors I'm doing at all.
I'm doing it on 2 circular needles, so I keep, when I change needles, then I lose where I am.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Get a sticky note.
yeah, I should have, I'm doing it on fingering yarn instead of, my other bigger yarn. I have it all on one needle, and that's what I should have used. So,
I'm doing it in the round, and I think I should have, done it flat or something because, but I'm getting it, but I don't care for the colors at all, but I could see where I might like one color, for, I like the pattern a lot, but the colors I have, I can see where I should. I might not be so bad. Who knows? We'll see when it's done, but
Well, and that's one of the reasons to do a steek is because, you can't necessarily tell how well you're going to like it until you've actually see the colors together.
yeah,
Because when you look at them, just in balls or even wrapping the yarns against each other,
yeah.
yeah, that looks pretty good. But then you get it in the thing and it's like, no, I don't think so.
Well, that's what's, when you do your samples there, Jean, how do you do them? Do you do them in the round with a steek or you just cut them off and do them on a flat
Actually, I do almost all of mine in the round.
in the round?
And then what I do is I usually just give myself a few extra stitches.
Yeah,
And then I just cut them up the middle.
so it's flat. Yeah, okay.
And
I get
so
ya.
and then I also wash it and block it because washing and blocking also makes a big difference with Fair Isle.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I have also been known to do it on double pointed needles and just cut the yarn at each end.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
It's a little bit tedious in the sense that, and I usually just tie the two that I'm redoing in a knot. So I probably do that a little bit less than I used to, just because it's a little faster and usually you won't end up having anything unravel more than a stitch or two.
Yeah, I get it. Well, in this case, on 50, we'll have plenty to,
Yes, you'll have
don't have to
lots-
worry about the unraveling part.
yes, you'll have lots to look at. So what about your colors don't you like, Jerry?
Oh, they're just quite different.
will be also-
The contrast is, I like your idea of the, when you said the heathered, I think I would like that.
I agree, same for me. with-
Yeah,
With less contrast.
And I have discovered a really good place to get Jameson and Smith yarn that doesn't have to come from Fair Isle or doesn't have to come from Shetland. There's a place called the Woolly Thistle that
Oh,
has
yeah.
that has an online store. They're out of they're in Massachusetts or someplace. But they carry all of the Jameson and Smith yarns. So
Cool.
they're a really good place to pick that up.
I actually have seen them on my, they pop up on my Facebook page. They're ads.
I really like them. They're a really nice shop, I will say. And they carry a lot of, well, they specialize in like British and European and Icelandic yarns.
Cool.
So how's it going?
I am done.
Are you?
Just,
I had,
well, with one repeat.
oh, okay.
The first repeat. Hoy, you
I
want
had to start over, so I'm just in the middle part. So looking forward to seeing how this is all going to look.
So what's the verdict, Jerry?
well, it looks better now that it's done, but it's not, I wouldn't want to make my sweater out of it. Let's put it that way. I'll show you in a minute. I just, I'm doing another solid round of the base color, just,
Ah, gotcha. Just to,
yeah, sort of finish it off a little bit.
yeah, so that you can see what the whole thing looks like.
Yeah, more or less.
Well, yes, exactly.
I will be interested to cut it, and lay it out flat to see what it, really.
Yeah,
But-
so that you can get the better sense of the whole thing.
Yeah, I like the navy and I actually like the other colors, but I don't know that I would ever put them together. I do have a light blue, which I would like better with the navy than the colors that I picked. I'm not sure why I didn't actually, but I was trying to be a little more out there, expand my,
Expand, get outside your comfort zone.
yeah, a little bit, but
Yeah, that's kind of hard to do. I have the things that I tend to like and I go back to them all the time.
yeah, I totally get you.
Yeah, so Jerry, you were asking about knitting flat versus knitting in the round.
Mm-hmm.
I almost always do my Fair Isle in the round because it's so much easier.
Yeah, the big projects, I totally think that you're right there. I just was wondering about your swatches.
Oh yeah, actually, I usually do them in the round too, just because the tension is probably more consistent.
More like what you would do.
Yeah, exactly. And frankly, knitting, stranded knitting going back and forth is kind of hard.
Harder than it is anyway, huh?
Well, exactly, because one row you're carrying the floats on the back, and then when you knit back the other way, you have to carry the floats on the front. And it took me a while before I even tried it. I've ended up doing it on 2-color button bands, but that's about it. And I don't mind knitting on double pointed needles, so I can set up a fairly small little swatch just on double points. And
yeah, I'm getting better at it. I've only really done them. Well, the first time I did it was when I really seriously did it at all, was when I wanted to do I passed the first level of the hand knitters, the Knitters Guild of America, or whatever the official name is. I passed the level 1, and one of the final projects was a mitten knit in the round. And until I did those, I really hadn't done much knitting in the round on double points. And of course, with that, again, it's so small, you almost have to use double points or two. I've never gotten the hang of the 2 circulars at all. I barely have the double points down. And so anyway, that I practiced a lot. And in the end, I wasn't that was about 10 years ago, and I wasn't as internet savvy as I am today in terms of looking up YouTube videos and
right
about how to do stuff. And so I just kind of plugged away, and in the end I shifted, it would make ladders. Obviously, when you're new at it, it makes ladders between the needles. And then I figured out that if I just would, there were bands of color, no Fair Isle. So I figured out if I just moved my needles over every once in a while, the band, the ladders wouldn't be all in the same place. And then when I was all done, I took a needle, and if I thought it looked like a ladder, I would pick it, till it looked even. And I just about oh, it's a good thing the lady didn't hear me when I got my, because I said right in the, you had to write up a little blurb with your project. And I said, this was one of the, I had just learned how to really do double pointed needles with this project. And I knitted about 5 mittens before I sent it in, you know, it wasn't like I just did one. And I just laughed because she said to me that it was, if for my first real project, she said it was one of the best ones she'd ever seen. And I just laughed because I had picked, you know, she said, I just was so surprised I didn't see any ladders. And
Right, so you
I had
done all the
hit them all.
tension on all of them.
Yeah. And so anyway, it was just kind of hilarious, but I did pass. I got dinged because it was supposed to, I have small hands. And so in the end, I had from the middle of the palm down, great. They had some real fancy cuff. But it said they wanted it 6 inches long or something from the thumb to the top or something.
Yeah.
And I'd completely spaced that off and I made it for my own hand, which wasn't that big. And so what I got dinged on was the fact that the palm wasn't long enough.
Or
And
it was too short.
yeah, it was too short. And so I had to make a whole nother damn mitten to turn in because of that. But
Oh.
anyway, I did pass. And so I have all these single mittens because I didn't have enough yarn to use for a pair.
Oh,
And
right,
so-
right.
And then the one was odd size, so I never have, I guess I did have 1 pair of mittens out of about 5 mittens that I made that matched. But anyway, it was kind of hilarious because I'm kind of a perfectionist and I wasn't, you know, who would turn in a mitten that had obvious ladders in it?
Well,
know,
yeah, I'm with you, Jerry. I wouldn't. have
Yeah,
done it.
I mean, you would fix them. You wouldn't just turn it in like, anyway, it was kind of funny.
I
but-
always had trouble with ladders with double points, and then I
Yeah.
changed to 2 circulars, and that kind of solved the problem.
Yeah, see,
So
I
that's what
never
I put socks on, but
got the hang of that, but I did, I still, if I start getting ladders, I'm very much more into pulling up the yarn at those places now without even thinking about it. That's
Yeah.
the thing, you know,
Yeah.
when you first start, you have to think about every time you go to the next needle. And so I have gotten away from that, but knitting socks and those small things on double points is not my favorite, but I do make a lot of hats. And so you always have to go to double points at some point in your hat.
Right, right.
But this is what the silly thing looks like. I don't know if you can,
Oh, yeah.
nice. Yeah,
and
Yeah,
it's
so
not
which-
too bad.
Which is the color that you really don't like?
And I'm not sure I like any of them together with blue, but but I did what you suggested, and I did like 2 rows of blue into the design and then did
Yeah,
pink,
and then
3
and 3
rows.
for the pink.
3 for the pink. Yeah, I was thinking there would be 4 for the white, but it turned out 3, 3, and 3, which I don't
Yeah.
know where my math was, but anyway, it's not bad, but I don't know that it would probably be okay for a hat, you know. I don't know. It's
You know,
kind
I
of
think-
cool.
I-
It's a cool design, but I like the way, look at the white, how it pops on that.
Yeah.
That's the green for the most part.
Yeah.
And it would be the same on the blue. The pink isn't bad, but it's not,
You know what you might like better with that, Jerry, would be just to have that be the dark blue all the way through.
yeah,
And then use the white and your light blue for the pattern.
yeah, that probably would be better. But I'm gonna play with it anyway. I like your idea of swatching. I notice you have a tag on all your swatches. So do
Well,
you,
The
what do you-
tag that the tag that I have, I don't have tags on all of them.
oh,
I have tags on ones that I have used the most when I've like been teaching.
oh,
But it is nice to have a tag. The tags that I have here basically tell me what the yarn is.
Oh, okay.
and then what the project was.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if you had a reference to the project. So you could go back. I don't know. Putting some kind of notes on there with maybe the needle size in the yarn would be a good thing.
Actually, the needle size would be good. I did not put the needle size on the tags that I have, but these were ones that they were, when I was teaching this class when I was down in Arizona.
I can't
they-
imagine Arizona wanting any Fair Isle. Were you in
Oh,
Flagstaff?
they do a lot with like hats and mittens and stuff like that is what they use their Fair Isle for the most.
Were you in Flagstaff or farther south?
No, I was in Tempe.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, they were all about the little projects. But see, the thing you have to remember is about people who live in Tempe and the Phoenix area. When it gets below 60, they're freezing and they want hats and gloves.
That's true. Yes. I have a sister-in-law and a brother-in-law that both live down there, and she she came up here in May, and she thought she was freezing.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it
you guys
was
probably
still-
thought it was really nice.
yeah, it was. We're in shirt sleeves and
Yeah,
and light
exactly.
clothes, and they're thinking they were frozen, and she wished the weather would warm up, and I'm like, well,
Like, hey, it's about as warm as it's gonna get, sorry.
yeah. And they used to live here, but they've been down there long enough, they forgot.
Yeah, no, that does happen.
Yeah. But,
So
yeah.
I did find one other swatch that I wanted to show you guys that has a double, it has a swatch for the of the ribbing.
Mhm.
And it also has sort of a divider between, like Jerry, you were talking about, what do you do in between things?
Yeah.
So essentially what this was for a sweater that somebody asked me to make for them. And basically they wanted just the color work just along the top. So sort of the yoke. So this was just a light gray for the bulk of the thing. And then I ended up not using this color because they didn't like this greenish color here, although I really liked it. But so basically this is where I put in every other one of whatever the background was.
Mhm.
And then I did the same thing up here with doing every other one with the background, and then put in this little pattern. And then this little pattern goes between, there's 4 of these bigger ones. And this has this little pattern in between. And then the one pattern I had this color, and I ended up using a light gray there. And then a gray and a red. And what I did for the other 2 is I just reversed them. So I ended up having one that was then ended up with this background color on blue. And then I did one that had the gray on red, and just reversed those for 4 different panels.
Cool.
And then using the same colors that I used for the patterns in here, and then using those same colors in the ribbing.
Yeah. That's what this hat was that I did. It has the colors from the hat in that rib.
Yep.
It's kind of interesting how that works out.
Yeah, so the only thing, Jerry, the one thing that I would suggest, like I noticed on that hat, it had the blue was the pearl.
Yeah. Mhm.
I would probably have made the blue the knit and done the other 2 as the pearl.
Oh, yeah, you could do that.
Because if you look at the one of the things that makes the difference there is then when you put them together, the background it just flows right up real seamlessly in between.
Yeah.
And then you have your
Yeah.
colored pieces there. So that's the only that is a suggestion that I would make.
Yeah. I made a note of that. Yes, I see what you're saying. I hadn't realized I even did that, actually.
So how's it going, Catherine?
Well, I think, I have one more row on the pattern, but I think where I went wrong was, the colors don't go very well. But I changed the background from light to dark at the same time that I changed the pattern from light to dark. And were you saying that you shouldn't do that, that you should have
Yeah.
them in different places?
That's generally what I do. I usually have it where it usually overlaps by one so that I'm not changing both colors at the same time.
Okay.
Sometimes it ends up happening like if you need, for some reason, you have some sort of a accent color or something, but
Okay. So I'd forgotten that, and I did them, 3, 3, 3.
yeah, and it just ends up being a little more jarring when you change both of them at the same time.
Yeah. Definitely. So.
So we're almost to end of time. So I sent you both a thing with, I'll show you what I sent you. So basically I just added in some of those other patterns that we talked about
Great.
with the number of stitches per row. So those should be in your email.
Cool.
Yeah, that'll be fun to do, and I'll have to read.
And then you can kind of take some of these and play around with them if you want to,
Yeah.
stretching and shrinking and doing different kinds of things like that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Anything else in terms of designing things that is on your mind that?
Not really. This is a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, get this down first and try different things, and then, look at books and get other ideas. But
Well, I can highly recommend the Ann Feidelson book. I like a lot. Alice Starmore's, I like her little library of patterns because they're great to be able to just, okay, I want a little something to put in here, and she gives you lots of ideas. The only problem that I have with her patterns is that all of her patterns, she uses symbols instead of colors. So there's really no way to tell what they're going to actually look like. It's hard to tell which colors she's working with that are in each place. So her patterns are kind of hard to understand. Whereas Ann Feidelson does all of hers in color. So you can see what the colors are doing and where they're going and all that kind of stuff. And that helps a lot.
I have a couple of Scandinavian books that have, different patterns and little bands and that kind of thing. So I can probably play with.
The other thing I would say, if you're gonna get into doing a lot of into some kind of patterning and playing with things, get one of these notebooks. There's an engineering and science notebook, and I think I bought these on Amazon probably. They have lined paper on one side and they have graph paper on the other.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And they work really, I use these for my knitting patterns. I also use them for my weaving patterns. And they're just really nice because you can set up, this is actually the pattern for the sweater I have on. So, you can just work things out on your graph paper and pencil, and then you can erase it and do it and then write in whatever colors you're going to use and all that kind of stuff. And so it works really well in my opinion.
I have some of that. The sweater I just thought was so amazing that you did, Jean, was that one you were working on. It wasn't too long before you moved from Brookings, and it was that one that had the circle pattern. It was all over.
Oh yeah, the star.
Yeah, it was. No, I don't.
Was it gray and white?
Gray and white, yeah, and had it wasn't like the same It was different. Oh, I just thought it was amazing because it wasn't the same everywhere.
No boobs.
No, and it was one, and it's in a book. It's called Latvian Dreams, I think.
Well, that's way past dreaming for me because I don't think I'm going to tackle anyone like that soon. But that was an amazing sweater. I don't know. That was very impressive.
I still have it and I wear it fairly, in the wintertime, I wear it fairly frequently because it's really warm.
Yeah.
But it's one that all of the patterns in that particular book are based on woven things,
Oh,
which is what gave me the idea to do this one.
yeah. Cool.
And so it's kind of fun because I can see how the weaving would come out in that same kind of a thing. So it's sort of a mixture of weaving and knitting.
Yeah.
But yes, it makes an amazing thing.
Mhm.
But it's definitely, every row is different for the
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
Well, so as you guys are working on things, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email and ask, and we can always do a consult if you're working on something and want some advice or whatever.
Okay, well, thank you. It was a really good class. I'm
Yes.
glad I took it.
just keep plugging away.
That's right. Keep on keeping on and practice and play. I mean, I think that's the thing with Fair Isle. It's one of those, and swatches are a really good way to just be able to play with it
Yeah.
and see, okay, this is what this will do, this is what this will do, and oh, I don't like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think we get too hung up on making something and then at least for me, I don't want to make a mistake. So then, yeah. So you're all tense, where if you just would
Right.
practice a sample first and say, okay, this is just a sample. It's not a biggie. If I make a mistake, it's not a big deal.
Exactly. And oh, okay, that one didn't come out the way I wanted. I'll just make another one and I'll
Yeah,
just keep
exactly.
doing it until I get what I like.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool.
All right.
Well, thanks a lot, Jean.
You bet.